and welcome to 20 Minutes. I'm Nadia Naqi with you. We have the Chairperson for HRCP, Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, Hina Jilani Saiba. We shall be discussing the political landscape and, of course, not to forget the really tragic Greece incident, which, of course, brings in a lot of questioning regarding what Pakistan has been doing on human trafficking. And do we have the laws in place? Is there a really serious crisis developing in the form of this human trafficking, which has been taking place for years and years and years. Thank you so much for joining us. But firstly, let's discuss the political landscape, because HRCP has given statements from every now and then after the post 9th May. How do you see the landscape right now? Do you really feel that there is lesser freedom of expression as compared to the previous regime? Or do you think that it is the same and it has been the same in Pakistan?
Well, it's similar to what we have seen in the past. At the same time, I think it's important to understand that there should be no time in any civilized country that a climate of fear is created. And I think this was intentionally created after the 9th of May. I'm very worried about the way that the whole question of arrests and disappearances are taking place at the moment. I have no quarrel with the fact that what we can see prima facie was a very, very serious incident that happened on the 9th of May in different parts of the country. There is no doubt in my mind that these were criminal acts, but there are laws to deal with those criminal acts, and every state has an obligation to stay within the law and not to overreach or over-amplify what has happened by using draconian methods to deal with something that in reality was a violent action on the part of a political party, whether it was intended, whether it was part of a conspiracy. But the reality is that acts of crime did happen. Nadia, I'm also very worried about this whole question of trials by military court. You know, we have been fighting against military jurisdiction over civilians for a long time. I'm happy that some people have now gone to court to challenge the Army Act with respect to what it contains at the moment, which seems to be the basis on which the government and the military authorities are resting their case that the Army Act allows this. For me, that's not important, because whether the acts committed on the 9th and 10th of May fall within what is allowed in the Army Act as far as civilians are concerned, whether these were acts of what do you call it, bagawat ko jo bhi aap kahein, and then or was it spying? But the point for me is that this law should be changed. If that exists, it must be changed. And I wish and I regret that even my own lack of diligence, that this was not done before. We should have done it much earlier, when there were so many civilians who were tried by military courts. I can say Idris Khatak, for instance. There are many others. This law must go when the law in this country already contains provisions to deal effectively with the crimes that are committed. Then there is no justification for the application of military jurisdiction over civilians.
So, ma'am, you've been talking about the landscape that you've just said, that what worries you, especially when it comes to freedom of expression, when it comes to forced disappearances, and how things are shaping up in order to fall into the trials that you've just spoken about. What about the civilian supremacy? Pakistan, civilian supremacy has always been under discussion in the political history of Pakistan. But what seems to right now, what we look at it is I think the biggest casualty in this post 9th May is of the civilian supremacy. However, do you really see that political parties are cognizant of this fact, and are they really worried about it?
Yes, of course they are cognizant about it, and they should be worried. The problem is that while there are people like you and me who have been asking the military to restrain itself and the politicians to assert themselves in order to regain the space that the state actually requires them to regain. You know, in the constitution of Pakistan, the definition of state under Article 7 is the government, the parliament, and any body that has the power to levy taxes. These are all civilian institutions. So the state should, by the constitution, by the very fact that the definition does not contain the military as part of it, the military only features as a subordinate institution of the state itself, which is the government, the parliament, the federal government, the parliament, the provincial assemblies, and local bodies. So these are some of the things that worry me. They talk about the constitution and yet show so much ignorance, deliberately trying to avoid the responsibility that each party has. The military has the obligation to restrain itself from outreach into civilian affairs. I think what happened on the 9th and 10th of May, and probably intentionally, by those who were perpetrating those crimes, they have intentionally or unintentionally invited the military to take space. And I think I blame them as much as I blame, and I'm disappointed in the lack of the government's ability to safeguard the civilian space.
Yes, the inability of, and I don't think so. They're really actually looking towards it because, you know, the political parties in power right now, they probably compare it with what had happened previously with them in the regime, and this is the time they feel that, you know, this is now their time to rule. This is their time to now take decisions, and I think in this entire business, they've really forgotten what they are losing for future to come. But moving on, do you really think that, you know, anybody who could have played power, you know, some kind of balance could be the judiciary, especially in the trichotomy of power? They could have maintained the balance.
I think we are all once again disappointed and very, very deeply disappointed by the role that the judiciary has played. I think all these actors, whether it's the government in power, the irresponsible and extremely violent opposition that we've seen, who has been playing political malafide in this country, plus the judiciary, I think they've all failed in their role to safeguard civilian supremacy in the first place, to safeguard the principle of trichotomy of power. They have failed to keep the rule of law. I'm very disappointed by the role of the judiciary. I think that they have allowed this polarization to become even more acute. They have become partisan. In many ways, one sees that angle of partisanship now, and that's the impression that everybody is getting. And that impression, even if it's a perception, is harmful.
So, ma'am, what's the solution to all this? Whatever has happened, you know, post 9th May, we also see the kind of arrests that are taking place, and I will discuss that with you. But what's the solution to all these problems that are worrying you and the civil society?
There are many solutions. The point is that the good intentions and good faith is missing. And if there were options that either the government and the opposition could have taken, they have themselves avoided to take those options. I think the solution could be a timely election. I understand the fact that when the two assemblies were dissolved by Imran Khan, the National Assembly and the two provinces in Sindh and Balochistan, they correctly said that they have a mandate for 5 years. And if there was a consensus that all elections must happen on the same day, then they have a stake in negotiating on their terms, because they lose time. They lose their mandate for 5 years also. So one could understand that there is a gray area here and that negotiations are needed. But I see no reason to postpone the elections beyond October, because not only regular elections, but timely elections are a very important and critical safeguard for democracy's sustainability in this country.
You know, a political dialogue. You said election is one solution, but there have been demands even earlier, whatever is left of PTI, they said that a political dialogue, would have kind of diffused the situation. And they still feel, I recall Asad Umar saying it, because he feels that everyone has reached their maximum limits. There's a lot of anger, there's a lot of stress. And the only way forward now would be to have a political dialogue amongst all the stakeholders. So it's not just going to be the political parties, but also the establishment, because they play an important role. And also, and then, of course, the election is one of the solutions that you had said. Do you really think, Hina Sahiba, that a political dialogue is necessary where establishment should also be a part of it?
For one thing, I think I have been hearing this for the past 3-4 years, also from what was then the political opposition and the parties that are now in power, that they wanted to have a dialogue. But there was, as I said, a very politically not well-intentioned plan, and there was this hybrid system on which they were all riding, the establishment as well as the PTI. I think that it would have been best if Imran Khan had not left the parliament, if he had not left the National Assembly and dissolved the provincial assemblies that he did, which I call an act of political mala fide. I also wish that any dialogue that is essential and critical to any resolution was happening in the parliament today. And that is the platform that would have been the best. I am not in favor of the establishment being a part of the dialogue itself, but I would like the establishment to hear and adhere to what the political parties say in terms of an absolute stronghold on the domain that the political leadership in this country, not the political leadership, but the parliament in this country has. I don't believe that in the current scenario, either the military leadership or the superior judiciary can be honest brokers. And they should desist from giving their terms to the politicians on the terms of reference of any dialogue. It is for these politicians to listen to what the people are saying and adopt those terms around which they must have the dialogue.
But, there's a lot of discussion around that whatever is happening right now is the same play. It's just different characters. And we see a lot of politicians under pressure to probably switch their parties or leave politics. And if they don't, we see what is happening in terms of the arrest, that they're out of one jail and they're booked in another case. And especially this MPO, the way it has been used in Punjab, it raises serious questions.
Yes, that's true. I think you're very right. This is the tragedy of this country, that we see the same scenario played again and again in the same manner, which shows that nobody wants to learn a lesson from the tragedies of the past. There have been extremely black eras in this country because of this political manipulation. But I also believe that, there is a time when politicians have to show some integrity in their claim to be representing the people. They represent the people in a very onerous way. It's a duty that is on them, and they are representing them in an institution like the parliament, which, despite the rogues that we have in the parliament, has to be respected as a forum. So they have a responsibility as well, and they must show some resistance to any pressures that are coming. I think the military had gone on a back foot, but Imran Khan's conduct and his party's various activities intentionally have invited them back in the space that we want them to leave.
All right. So lastly, I'd like to ask you about the tragic Greece boater, incident, which is not the first one, I'd say. And human trafficking has been a very serious issue in Pakistan. I don't know how much the government really pays attention to it, but the Prime Minister now has formed a committee and has asked for recommendations that how to stop this human trafficking. What would you say, Hina Jilani Sahiba, what recommendations does the government actually need when we all know that everything is in place, how to stop it?
Look, this illegal migration is a global issue, but in the middle of that issue, at the core, is the tragedy that these illegal migrants experience, and the loss of life, the loss of dignity, the loss of liberty in many cases, is something that I think the world should not accept. Unfortunately, it's not just Pakistan, everywhere in the world, there is the least kind of sensitivity to what we call international human rights norms when it comes to illegal migration or human trafficking. Now, human trafficking is a very serious crime. I think this is not the first incident that has happened in Greece where Pakistani young people and families are involved. There have been many incidents in the past. It does nobody credit to take up issues and raise hue and cry only when an incident happens. This is a serious crime. Absolutely. And there are many challenges in trying to deal with this kind of crime and to end this kind of trafficking. But at the same time, I think we have also to pay attention to the fact that how we as a country have failed to provide the opportunities for people to earn a livelihood in this country, so that there is no necessity to take these drastic and desperate measures. The right to life is a part of the right to livelihood also. And I think this is where we should also be paying full attention. Of course, there is this law enforcement aspect to the issue, and people who are in this notorious crime must be dealt with very strictly, and all attention must be paid to investigating these events. But at the same time, economic issues in this country are also very critical, even for this tragedy. Even otherwise, of course, Pakistan is facing a terrible crisis right now. But this is also part of the rebuilding of this country that we must be thinking of, providing livelihood, so that these desperate measures are not something that people consider a necessity.
Yes, so you have to cut the fire first and then, get to why the fire was there. You're absolutely right on that this is not the first incident. But yes, it is a global issue. But in Pakistan, we've seen that in all the rural areas, and especially where people cannot earn so much, they're given this, it's like a sugar-coated candy, how they present it, that, you're just supposed to pay this much and we're going to be taking you outside, you can settle there. And, when you convert, they do that conversion. And these people may not be so literate, and they feel that they're going to be sending a lot of money back home. However, having said that, this cannot take place, Hina Sahiba, without the law enforcement agencies. That there have to be some people who are hand in glove who let all of this happen.
Not only law enforcement agencies, I think there are many people who are benefiting from this kind of human trafficking, and it has become an industry now. And people should understand that this is something that not only is tragic for the families, but it is also a great tragedy for a nation. When we see an exodus of people in desperate circumstances where they want to earn their living outside of this country with hopes which are very seldom they fructify. Those hopes and those dreams necessarily do not come to any conclusion, even if they land on foreign shores. So these are some of the things I think we have to understand. Now, these people are paying the traffickers 2.5 billion rupees. Why should there not be many schemes that should be opened up to give opportunity to people to invest that kind of money here? And small level entrepreneurship should be a chance for these people to stay in their own countries and not lose their lives and their liberties and their dignity in the way that they are losing it now.
Thank you so much, Hina Jilani Sahiba, for participating on 20 Minutes. Well, we really hope that the Prime Minister's asked for recommendations to stop the human trafficking. We'll also get to the root cause of it, as you just mentioned, that why people leave, why do they pay so hefty amounts to these criminals in order to, undermine their own dignity and also end up losing their lives. Thank you so much for being with us. That's all for now.